Well, staying with Lebanon, human rights groups have sounded the alarm over the country's plans to send refugees back to Syria. This week, Lebanese officials proposed sending 15,000 refugees a month back to Syria in cooperation with the regime of Bashar al-Assad. Well, to talk more about that, we're joined in the studio by our Middle East correspondent, Sarah Shlala. And Sarah, tell us then, what exactly is the Lebanese government proposing here?
It's a very sad reality, Laura, because the Syrian refugees' very presence within Lebanon is a domestic hot topic. And much of Lebanon's ills actually are even consistently blamed on Syrian refugees. And Syrian refugees make up 1.5 million of the population, of the 6 million current population living in Lebanon. They host that many of them. And Syrian refugees, though, have never been treated equally there. So there's many restrictions. They face many restrictions in all facets of their lives living in Lebanon. They face discrimination as well. Nothing comes easy for them there. And this is all at the hands of the Lebanese official bodies there. And now also amid the economic crisis that Lebanon is going through, it's nowhere near easy, and they are the most affected, the refugees within the country. But what we know so far about what the Lebanese government is doing, or what these Lebanese officials are doing in relation to this and what they're proposing, is that Assam Sharaf ad-Din, who's Lebanon's Minister of Displaced Affairs, actually came out yesterday with an announcement saying that they're working on a plan in cooperation with the Syrian regime to repatriate about 15,000 Syrians every month back to Syria, as you just mentioned in the opener. He's also been quoted as saying actually that after the war ended in Syria, according to him, and there's some sort of safety in Syria, that it's almost unacceptable for displaced Syrian refugees to remain living in Lebanon, and that they must go back to their country, to Syria. So that's what he's been quoted as saying, and he's even went as far as to say that financial aid will even be cut off for Syrian refugees still calling Lebanon home, because it's apparently, and I'm quoting him again here, an incentive for Syrian refugees to stay in Lebanon, according to him. And the minister is even proposing to coordinate with other countries who host a lot of Syrian refugees, just like Lebanon. We're talking about countries like Turkey and Jordan. He's working alongside them to facilitate a plan, a proposal for the facilitation of the return of these refugees back to Syria. And even last month, on the 20th of June, Lebanon's caretaker Prime Minister Najib Mikati even was quoted as saying that the country was ready to even expel Syrian refugees unless the international community works to repatriate them back to Syria. The Prime Minister said that there's no longer the capacity for Syrian refugees and for Lebanon to even bear the burden in the present circumstances with the economic crisis in Lebanon, to have them there. And even that was backed by Lebanon's Social Affairs Minister back in May, and he was also quoted as saying that Lebanon can no longer afford to host such a large number of this population. So overall, this is, just to sum up, this is exactly what's been said, but what hasn't been said so far is how Sharaf ad-Din, there's no details about how he even is planning to go about achieving such a mass return back to Syria, to send all these refugees back. How will they do that? All that's been said so far is that the ministry is forming committees with other concerned authorities to work on repatriating them back, but nothing else has been said about when and how.
It's in the pipeline, but we don't have any practical steps as yet. And for a lot of people, alarm bells will ring when they hear that the Lebanese government wants to work in conjunction with the regime of Bashar al-Assad. I mean, would it even be safe for Syrian refugees to be sent back?
It would not.
What about dissidents, for example?
It would not be safe for them to return. And there's even people on the other side of the coin saying, rights monitors like Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, they've also really come out and saying, consistently warning against doing so, against sending these refugees back, because it isn't safe. They're saying that Syria is not safe for their return, especially because of the level of torture and arbitrary arrest that they would be experiencing and subjected to when they're going back to Syria under Bashar al-Assad's regime. And Human Rights even released a report in October, the World Report 2022, which documents 21 cases of arrest and arbitrary detention, 13 cases of torture, 3 kidnappings, 5 extrajudicial killings, and 17 enforced disappearances as well. And that's between the years of 2017 and 2021 among the refugees who had returned back to Syria from Jordan and Lebanon. But on the flip side, when you think about it, Lebanon is not worried about the consequences of these these Syrian refugees may or may not face when they return them back to Syria. All that they're concerned about is that they see one fact of the matter, which is, okay, the war seems to be dying down there. It seems like there's kind of a little bit of safety now within the country. It is their responsibility now to make their way out of our country and to go back to their own homeland. And this is all that they see, and they don't want to see past that. And it's in a way as well, it's exacerbating public resentment among the Lebanese public. Because of the poverty that's already there within Lebanon, it's like they cannot bear.
Crisis. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's a sad story. Sarah, thank you very much indeed. Sarah,
absolutely.